Welcome everyone, as we learn the very chashuv limud of Chok Yisrael for Parsha Shlach, day 5. And as we learn this on Lag Baimer, so we have in mind the great Butzina Denura, the great torch of fire of Chochmas Hanister, and of course Nigla, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Zecher Tzadik, Kodesh Uvracha, Zchus Yagan Aleinu. So the spies, Vayalu Vanegev, they went to the south, and then Vayovoy Ad Chevron, this is in the singular, Kalev made a pit stop in Chevron to be mispalo by the Marsa Machpelah. Visham, and there were the giants Achiman, Sheshai, V'Salmai, Yelidei Ha'anak, the children of the giant. V'Chevron Sheva Shonim Nivnasa, and Chevron was 7 times more fertile, Lifnei Tzayan Mitzrayim, more than the royal city of Tzayan in Egypt. That's the way Rashi interprets this pasuk. Not that Chevron was established 7 years before, because Canaan was a younger son, and Mitzrayim was an older son, so you don't build a city for your younger son before your older son. Usliku b'draima v'asa ad Chevron v'samon achiman sheishai v'salmai b'nei Giboraya v'Chevron shva shnin is b'nias kodam tones de Mitzrayim. Rashi says, "Vayavoy ad Chevron." Not everybody. Kalev levado yolach sham. Kalev himself went there. V'nishtateach al kivrei avos, and prostrated himself by the Marasa Machpelah. Shelo yeinisus lechaveirav, that he shouldn't be tempted by his associates liyos ba'atzasam, to join in their evil counsel. V'cheinu aimer, and so it says, v'lo eteines haaretz, and to him was awarded as Yerusha, the land, asher dorach ba, that he trod upon. V'ksiv vayitnu lekalev es Chevron. Kalev was given as a Yerusha Chevron. Sheva shonim nivnasa, 7 years. Now, simply read, it means that Chevron was 7 years built before Tzayan Mitzrayim. But Rashi says that can't be pshat. After Shebana Chomes Chevron L'Knan, is it possible that Chom built Chevron L'Knan B'nai HaKatan, for Canaan, his younger son, Kodim Sheyivna es Tzayan LeMitzrayim B'nai HaGadol, before he built Tzayan for Mitzrayim, his older son? That can't be. Elashaya Samavuna B'chol Toiv, it was more superior in every way, Al Echad Mishiva B'Tzayin, 7 times more than Tzayin. Now, that tells us how precious Eretz Yisrael is. Obal Hadiacha, and it comes to show you Shivcha Shel Eretz Yisrael. She'ein Lach Troshin Be'Eretz Yisrael Yosim Chevron. There's no rocky land in Eretz Yisrael more than Chevron. That's why it's chose for a cemetery. Lefika Chiktzur L'Kvuras Mason. That's why it's chosen to bury people. There's no place greater in all the lands than Egypt. Shenema Kigan Hashem, like the garden of Hashem, Keretz Mitzrayim. And Tzayin is the most superior of Mitzrayim. But Tzayin hi ha'ma'ula sheberetz Mitzrayim, and Tzayin is the choice of Mitzrayim because that's a royal area. Shesham Moshe Malachim, that's where royalty lives. Shenamar ki hayu b'Tzayin Sayrav. In Tzayin were the nobles. And yet Chevron, the most craggy, rocky place, was 7 times better than the royal place of Egypt. And yet Vayisa Chevron, Toiva Mimena Shiva Chalakim, was 7 times as good than Tzayin, the best of Egypt, which is like Kigan Hashem. Vayavo at Nachal Eshkol, they came to Nachal Eshkol, to the valley of the cluster. We'll see it was named Al Shem HaOsid because of now, the events now, that they took a cluster from there. Vayichrisu misham zmayra, they cut a branch, a vine. Ve'eshkol avonim echad, 1 cluster of grapes. Vayisauhu b'mayit, and they carried it with a pole. Bishnoyim, 2 people held the pole. Umina Rimayim, one person took a pomegranate, Umina Tainim, and one person took a fig. Va'asawa nachla de iskala v'kotzim itaman ovarta va'askal invin chod unitoloi baricha b'srein umin rimanaya umin teinaya. Says Rashi's Meira, that's Soichas Geffen, a branch from the vine, ve'eshkol shel hanovim toliba, with a cluster hanging on it. Vayisa'u b'moit b'shnayim, and they carried it with a pole with two people. Says Rashi, if it's a pole, obviously they needed two people. Mimash m'shnema vayisa'u b'moit, they carried it with a pole. There's one person at each end. Any yadashu b'shnayim, matam loimish b'shnayim, b'shnei moit is two poles. Now the Gemara says actually there were four poles in the shape of an X. Actually, there were 8 poles. Excuse me. No. There were 4 poles carried by 8 people. You had 2 poles. That's why it says Shnayim. 2 poles handled by 4 people, and then another 2 poles underneath it to brace it like a shape of an X. So 8 people carried the cluster. We know it's 8 people because 10 people were needed to carry. 1 carried a pomegranate, 1 carried a fig, 8 carried the grapes, and Yeshua and Kalev didn't participate. HaKetzad, Shmoina Notlu Eshko, 8 people carried the cluster. Echad Notel Te'ena, 1 carried the fig, Echad Rimain, 1 carried the pomegranate. Yeshua and Kalev Leilat Nuklum. Yeshua and Kalev didn't participate. Lefisha Kol Atzmon. The whole purpose of this by the Meraglim was Laitzi Diba Niskavno. They wanted to speak bad about the land. Keshem Shepiria Mishuna, just like the fruit is unusual, so gigantic. Kach Ama Mishuna, so also the nation was unusual and not able to be conquered. How much did each one were able to carry, to let you know how humongous the cluster was? Remember, they took 12 stones from the waterbed of the Yarden, where the Oren was standing in the Yarden when the waters split. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Yarden as a proof that they were once in the middle of the Yarden, and they set up these 12 stones in Gilgal, which they wrote the Torah on in 70 languages, and it says, Harimu lahem ish evan achas min hayarden al shichmai, each man carries a stone on his shoulder, ve'kimua begilgal, and they set it up in Gilgal. V'shoklim Rabbi Seinu, and Rabbi Seinu estimated that mishkal kol achas, that each man was able to carry arba'im sa, that's 40 sa that they picked up themselves. The gmire tuna de midlay inish al kaspe, that which you have to pick up and put on your shoulder itself, ein ela shlish masui, it's a third of the weight, mimasui shemisayin oisay larim. If people lifted it up on your shoulder, you could carry 3 times as much. So a person is able to carry a weight of 120 sa, and therefore the computation was that the cluster of grapes was many, many tons. Many tons. Lamakamahu, that place that they cut the cluster, Karanachal Eshkol, they called the valley of the cluster. Al Oidoisa Eshkol, because of this cluster, Asher Korsum Misham B'nai Yisrael, that they risked to cut and to confiscate. La'asra'u Karanachla, the Iskala al Esak Iskala, the Kotzum Itaman B'nai Yisrael. Vayeshuva Mitura Aretz, and they returned from spying the land, Miketz Arba'im Yom, at the end of 40 days, V'savu Mil'alala Yas'ara Misayf Arba'im Yom. Says Rashi, that was a very large distance to traverse in just 40 days. V'aloi Arba Meis Parsa al Arba Meis Parsahi, the land is 400 parsais by 400 parsais. U'mahalach Odom Beinani Eser Parsas L'Yom, and the average walk of a person is 10 parsas a day. Hari mahalach arba'im yom min hamizrach l'malef. It's a distance of 40 days just to go from east to west. And remember, we said that they went a gamma, an L. V'heim holchu orka v'rachba. They walked the length and the breadth. Ela shegoli lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyigzer aleim yom l'shana. That he would decree that they should be in the desert every day. They should be a year for every day that that they spied the land. So this is already 40 years. If it took longer, they would have been in the desert even longer. So kitza lefneim hasaderech, he gave them kvitza saderech that the trip shouldn't be longer than 40 days. Vayelchu, they went, vayavo, and they came back, el Moshe vel Aaron, vel kol adas bnei Yisrael, and to the assemblage of bnei Yisrael, el midbar Paran, to the desert of Paran, Kadesha, to Kadesh, vayeshivu oisam dover, and they returned to Moshe and Aaron a report, ves kol ha'eda, and the entire assemblage, vayarum es priaretz, they showed them the fruit of the land, va'azolu va'asol levas Moshe, ulevas Aaron, ulevas kol kanishta bnei Yisrael, lemadbara deparan l'rekam, v'asivu yason piskama, v'yos kol kanishta, v'achazi unon yas iba da'ara, says Rashi, vayelchu vayavo, they went and they came. So here Rashi tells us from the Gemara that just like they came back with an Eitzerah, so also they left planning to speak evil. Ma'al vayelchu lahakish halichosan lebi'asan, to compare their going to their coming. Ma bi'asan be'eitzerah, they left, they came back with evil counsel. Af halichosan, when they initially left, it was be'eitzerah. So Maral asks, but Rashi said in the beginning of the parsha that when they left, they were Anoshim. And Anoshim are prestigious people, Ksherim. And Rashi says initially they were Ksherim. Here it seems to be that they left with bad plans in the beginning. So Rashi says, Maral says a scary thing. The Maral says that the principals that sent them wanted them to come back with a bad report. And since Shlucha shel Adam K'moisai, that a messenger becomes like the principal, that impacted upon them. Scary thought. Vayashivu Aisam Dava, they brought back a report, as Moshe as Aaron to Moshe and Aaron. Now, going about the spies that were at the time of Yeshua and Rachav Azayna, remember Rachav Azayna lowered them down and they told them to hide in the mountains for 3 days. So Vayelchu, they went, Vayavo Ahara, they listened to her, they hid in the mountains, Vayeshvu Sham Shleishis Yamim, and they stayed there 3 days, At Shavu HaRoitfin, until those that were chasing them gave up and returned. Vayavakshu HaRoitfin B'chol HaDerech, the chasers searched the whole road, V'loi Matzo, and couldn't find them. Vayeshuvu Shnei Anoshim, and then the 2 men returned, Vayerdu Me'ahar, and they came down the mountain, Vayavru, and they passed, Vayavo El Yeshua ben Nun, they came to Yeshua ben Nun, Vayisapru Loi Eskol HaMoitzi Soisam, all that they discovered, Vayomer El Yeshua Kinasan Hashem B'Yodeinu Eskol Haaretz, we see that Hashem delivered into our hand the land, V'gam Nomogu Kol Yeshvei Haaretz Mipaneinu, that they melted in fear all the inhabitants because of us. Vayashkem Yeshua Babayka, Yeshua got up in the morning, Vayisu Me'ashitim, and he traveled from Shittim, Vayavo Ad HaYarden, and he arrived at the edge of the Yarden, Hu V'chol B'nei Yisrael, Vayolinu Sham, and they tarried there, they lodged there, spent the night there, Terem Yavayu, before they would cross, Vayhi Miksei Shloishis Yamim, at the end of 3 days, Vayavru HaShoitrim Mikerev HaMachna, the officers passed through the camp. We'll see what their message is in the next Chok. And now, the Tillim continues from what we left, that the Rabbeinu Shalom acted harshly. Vayitzaku El Hashem, we cried out to Hashem Batzar Lehem, in our distress, and Mimitzukaseim, and from our travail, Yatzilem, he saved them. Vayadrichem b'derech yeshara, and he led us on a straight path. Loleches el ir Moshe, to take us to a settled city. Yoidu la Hashem chasto, we thank Hashem for his kindness, v'nifla'osav l'vnei adam, and his wonders to people. Ki hizbiya nefesh shokeka, because he satisfied the pining soul, v'nefesh re'eva, and the hungry soul, milei toiv, he filled with good. Even those of the Yidden that were in jail, yoishvei choshech v'tzalmoves, those that were in the darkness and the shadow of death, asirei oni uvarzel, those that were bound by affliction and irons, they also have to give thanks for being released from jail. And now we learn the Mishnayos from the 10th parak of Chulin. One of the 24 matnas kahuna is to give from an animal hazroya, the right foreleg, valachayayim, the cheeks, vakeva, and the maw. Now this is noyagin ba'aretz uv'chutz la'aretz. This is practice in Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. B'fnei habayis, when there is a temple, b'shaloi b'fnei habayis, and without the temple. B'chulin, only by non-sacred animals, avaloi b'mekdashim, but not that which is a carbon. From a carbon, you don't have to give the kohen the zroya al chayayim vakeva. Because if we didn't learn this, we would think shaya b'din, we would make a kal v'chaymer or for the ori or ma'im achulin she'enon chayavim b'chazav v'shoik. You don't have to give the breast and the thigh to the kohen. Chayavim b'matanas, you have to give the right foreleg, the cheeks, and the maw. Kachim shechayavim b'chazav v'shoik, you have to give the breast and the thigh. Einoi din b'matanas, you should surely have to give the right foreleg, the cheeks, and the maw. Talmud Leimer, it says by the kachim, the etein oisam, you give them the chazav v'shoik, the breast and the thigh, la'aron ha'koyin, or levanav to Aaron ha'koyin and his children, l'chak oilam, as an everlasting statutes. Ein loy ela masha amar ba'inin, only oisam, only the breast and the thigh, which it says in the parsha. Kol ha'kadoshim shekodam mum kavua le'ekdesham, all kachim that have a permanent blemish before you were makdish it. So since it had a permanent blemish, it wasn't fit to be a carbon, and therefore it doesn't get kedushas haguf. Then v'niptu, when you redeem it, it goes back to being a regular animal. Chayavim b'bechayra, and therefore like a regular animal. If it has a firstborn, you have to give the firstborn to the kayin over matanas, and you have to give the zoya al chayayim vakeva. And when you redeem it, v'yaitz the chulin, it goes out to be regular chulin. Li'gazes, you could shear its wool. Ule'aved, you could work with it. Uvladan, its offspring, v'chalavan, and its milk is mutter la'acha pidyonin, after you redeem it. V'ashoichetin b'chutz, if you shecht it outside, you're potter, because the only time you're going to be chayiv is if it's a roi to be brought lepesach el mayid. And since this has a permanent blemish, it's not roi to be brought to the pesach el mayid, so you're not chayiv chorus for shechting it outside. Ve'ein oisin tmura, it cannot affect the exchange. You can't say zeh tacha zeh and that the kedusha should pass over. However, v'imeisu, and if it dies, you padu, because since it had a mum kavua, it never had a kedusha saguf, so you could redeem it, and we don't say ein paidin as a kachim la'achilan l'kalavim. They can't redeem kachim to feed it to the dog, because this never really had a kedusha saguf, since it had a permanent blemish. Chutz min ha'bechar u'min ha'maiser, except if it's a firstborn itself, then even if it had a balmum, if it's firstborn, it gets kedusha saguf. And if it's meiser, because if it's the 10th animal that went through the corral, it says lo yevaker bein toiv bein ra. You shouldn't distinguish whether it's good or whether it's bad. So it has a kedusha saguf. Those two cases, it would have a kedusha saguf. Kol shekodam hekdeshon es muman. If you are makdish it, and then it gets a mum kavua, a permanent blemish. Oh, but since you are makdish it when it was good, it gets a kedusha saguf. Then it becomes blemished. Oy mum over lactation, or even if it had a passing blemish when you're makdish it, because a passing blemish doesn't count. And then after you were makdish it, so before it got a permanent blemish, the kedusha zaguf was chal on it. So now, v'niptu, when you redeem it, since it was once a bona fide hektish, p'turim min ha-b'chayra, the child that it has doesn't have a din of b'char, because the b'char is only if it comes from chulin. This is psulei mukdashin. U'min ha-matanas, there's no zraya al-chayayim v'akeva. Ve'ein on yotzim, since it's psulei ha-mukdashim, disqualified kachim, you cannot treat it like a regular animal, therefore it cannot ligazes, you cannot shear its wool, uleavid, you cannot do work with it, uvladan v'chalavim asur la'acha pidyanan, and its milk and its children are forbidden for regular use even after it's redeemed. V'ashoichten b'chutz chayiv, and shechting it outside is chayiv. Now this is a very big chiddush. We don't hold this way. Because since it still now has a permanent blemish, it's not right to be brought lepesach el mayit. Only time you chayiv shchutei chutz is if it's fit to be brought to the pesach el mayit, but this is not, because it has a mum kavua. But the Gemara says that this part of the Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Kiva, it's talking about a mum that is not noticeable, b'doikin sheba'ayin, in the white of the eye. And since it's a mum in the white of the eye, the din is im olu lo yardu. If it was put on the mizbech, it doesn't come down, and therefore Rabbi Kiva holds if you shecht it outside, you chayiv kares. V'aisin tmura, since it had a kedusha before you redeem it, it can affect an exchange. The imesu, if it dies before you redeem it, you kaveru, you have to bury it, because since it had a kedusha, because you were makdish before it had a mum kavua. So you can't redeem some kedusha to feed it to the dogs. The emesu, the only thing you'd be able to do is feed it to the dogs or give it to a guy. You can't redeem kachim to feed to the dogs or give to a guy. So then you have to bury it. Now here we have an interesting halacha. Bechar, a firstborn that was given to a kohen, and it got a mum. And the kohen sold it to Marshall with a mum. And then it got mixed up with 100 other animals. Very interesting. It got mixed up. It got mixed up with 100 other animals. And it was sold to 100 people, 101 people. Each one does not have to give the Zrei al Chayayim Vakeva. Why? Because they say maybe our animal was once the Bechar. That's part of from Zrei al Chayayim Vakeva. So Bechar shenisar b'meya, bizman shemeya shoichtin es kulan, when 100 different people slaughter the animal, poitrines kulan. Each one doesn't have, because he says, prove it that my animal wasn't originally a bechar. That's part of from Zraya Chayayim Vakev. Echad sheichet es kulan. But if Marshall shechts all of them, then he could only exempt one. One of them is pater. Then poitrin lo yechad. Then we just say he doesn't have to give from one of the animals. Hasheichet lekayin v'lanachri. Let's say Eddie shechts for a kayin or a guy. Now the animal of a kayin or a guy is pater from Zraya Chayayim Vakeva. So pater min amatanas. V'mishtate fimam. Let's say that the guy has a partnership with a kayin or a guy, so he doesn't have to give. But he has to mark on the animal that it's shared with a kayin or a guy, that nobody should suspect him that he's not giving Zraya Chayayim Vakeva. Now, if a kayin sells him an animal, v'im amar chutz min amatanis, he says, I'm selling you besides the Zroya al Chayim Vakeva, then Potem and Amatanas. He doesn't have to give the Zroya al Chayim Vakeva because that part he doesn't own. Now, here's an interesting thing. Amar, if let's say Yitzi says, Mecharli b'nei me'eha shel para. Sell me the stomach of this bull. V'hoya be'matanas. So I make up to sell it to him for $200, and in it was the keva, the more. Yitzi has to give the more to the kain. And he can't tell me I'm deducting from the $200 because he knows that I don't own the more. No, he's still the kain. Yitzi has to give the more, but he can't deduct and say, look, I had to give the more, I'm deducting it from the $200 because he knew that the more goes to the kain. However, if he bought for me the stomach and I weighed it, and I charge him $50 a pound. So I charged him, it was 5 pounds, so I charged him $250. So then, he has to give the more to the kain, because I had no right to charge him for the more, because it's stolen merchandise, it belongs to the kain. There, since I charged him by the pound, so it was clear that I was charging him for the more, he could deduct it. He could weigh the more, and if the more was a pound, he could demand back $50. Gersh Niskayer, the more was one of the 4 stomachs of an animal. Gersh Niskayer, a convert that converted. Let's say Tony becomes Matisyo. And he had a cow. If it was slaughtered when he was Tony, when he was a guy, then Potter. Then he doesn't have to give the Zoyach and Bekeva even after he converts. Mishin is Gaya, but if he slaughtered it after he converted, then Chayiv. Suffolk, if it's in doubt, listen, he wasn't looking at the clock when he went into the mikveh and when he circumcised himself, so he's not sure if it was slaughtered before or after Potter. Why? Because the Kayin has to be able to prove it. The Kayin wants to take from him the Zoya Chayam Vakeva Alav Arai. He has to bring the proof. Now we're going to define a Zoazroya. What is the right foreleg? Min aperek shel akuva, from the knee ad kof shel yad, until the shoulder blade. V'hu shel nazir, and that's the same thing as the Zroya b'shela, the cooked right foreleg, which is waved by from the shlamim by the procedure of a nazir. Ukenegdoi baregel, and the corresponding part in the hind leg is the shaik, is the thigh. Rabbi Yehuda says shaik is minaperik shel akurva, from the knee at soiver shel regel, until the fleshy part of the hind leg. Ezel lechi, what's the jaw? Minaperik shel lechi, from the joint of the jaw at piko shel gargeris, until the opening of the esophagus. And now we learn a Gemara from Chulin Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel, a very interesting Gemara. Again, on this very auspicious evening of Hilula de Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai should be a good to better for all of us. Amar Rava, Badiklan Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef tested us. Hai kahana dechotif matanasa, a kohen that grabs the Zroya Chayim Vakeva from Yisrael, Chavuve Kamachav mitzvah, is he showing a desire for the mitzvah? Or is he disgracing it by grabbing it? Or Peshatnale, and we resolved it, it says in the Pasuk V'nasan, you have to give the chance for the Yisrael to give it, and not to take it for yourself. Amar Abaya, Mereish havachatifna matnasa. Initially, I would snatch the Zoya v'chayam akeva as a kayen. Amina chavuve kamechabivna mitzvah. I thought I was showing a desire for the mitzvah. Kavan the Shamana Lahav Nasan, when I heard the drasha extrapolating from Vanasan, you should give a chance for the Yisrael to give it. Not that the Kain should take it. I didn't take it, but Meimer Amar Havuli, but I would say, give it to me. When I heard that which it says in the Braisa, Vayatu Achrei Abatza, that the children of Shmuel followed prophet. Remeir Aimer B'nai Shmuel Chelkom Shal B'filim, they asked for the Kahanic portions. Meimer Nami Lo Yamin, I don't even ask. However, V'yavuli Shekilna, but if they offer it to me, I take it. But Kavan the Shemana Law Desanya, at a time where there wasn't enough lechem upon him to go around, there was a me'era, there was a curse given, and a little bit didn't satisfy. Hatznuim, those that were modest, moishchin es yedeim, withdrew their hands and didn't grab. V'agargaronim, and the gluttons, cholkin, they would grab. So in order not to appear like a glutton, mishkalami lo shekilna, I didn't even take, I left it for more needy kohanim. Levar mali yom de kippur, except on Erev Yom Kippur, once a year I took, that people shouldn't think that I'm not a kohen, to establish that I'm a kohen. So the Gemara says, why didn't he rely on the fact that he went to Duchen to establish that he was a kohen? V'lifrois yodei, says the Gemara, well, Abaye was very busy giving share. Ansel Yidnei, he didn't have time to get to the Duchen because he was busy giving share all the time. Amar Rav Yosef, Hai Kahana, the Islay Tzurba Merabanan B'Shivavuse, a kohen that has a Talmudic scholar in his neighborhood that he wants to benefit, he wants to benefit with the matanas that he didn't get yet. Amar Rav Yosef, Hai Kahana the Islay Tzubam Rabbanan B'Shivavuse. He has a Talmudic scholar in his neighborhood that is learning in Kaila, and he doesn't have Udechikalei Milsa, and he needs the food. He doesn't have the food. Liskelei Matanasa. He could say that the matanis that I'm gonna get, I'm mizakeh to that poor Talmid Chacham. And he could do it even before he gets it, and then they could give it straight to that Talmid Chacham. It's big Kiddush. In other words, even though he's the Kain, the Talmid Chacham is not a Kain, but he could say that which I will get, I'm being mezakeh to that Talmid Chacham. We'll call him, let's say, Rabbi Chacham. I'm being mezakeh to Rabbi Chacham, and then they could give it straight to Rabbi Chacham. And it's talking about b'makirei kuno leviyah, somebody who is of the well-known Kohanim and Leviyim, so that it was usual that he would get. Now the Gemara tells us a story about this. Rabba v'Rav Safra iklu lebei Mar Yochna b'reid Rav Chana barada. Rabba and Rav Safra visited the house of Mar Yochna, the son of Rav Chana barada. Now Rabba was not a Kain. Rav Safra was not a Kain. But Amru lei lebei Mar Yochna b'reid Rav Chana bar Bisna. And some say it wasn't Mar Yochna, the son of Rav Chana bar Ada, but it was Mar Yochna, the son of Rav Chana bar Bizna, just for accuracy. Ovid lahu igla tilsa. He prepared a calf. This was the Talmudic filet mignon. He prepared a calf a third to its mother. Third to its mother was the most developed calf. Others say it was a calf a third of its development, which is very tasty. So Amalei Rava L'Shamei. Rava told the attendant of Mar Yoichna Bereder Rav Chana Barada, Zakei Lon Matnasa, the attendant of Rav Chana Bar Bizna, or the attendant of Mar Yoichna was a kohen. Amalei Rava L'Shamei, Rava said to the attendant, Zakei Lon Matnasa, give us the matanas, because I want to eat tongue with mustard. And part of the jaw was the tongue. So he said, give us the matanas, because he was a Talmudic scholar. Give us the matanas. After all, he was a kohen. Give us the matanas because I want to eat tongue with mustard. So zakale. So he was zoiche in it, even though Yoichna didn't give it yet to the attendant. Rava ate from it. Rav Safra lo yachal. Rav Safra didn't eat because he didn't want to do it because the attendant didn't yet get it from Yoichna. Yoichna didn't give it to him yet. So akruya le Rav Safra bechelma. Rav Safra that night had a dream, and in the dream he dreamt it. It was like it had a sinister implication. Madei beged b'yoyim kara, like a worn-out piece of clothing on a cold day, which it doesn't help much. Chaymeitz al neser, or vinegar on alum. V'shor bashirim al levra, is the singing of a song for a bad heart. So he was afraid that maybe he was being read this dream because he didn't accept the memra of his Rebbe, Rav Yosef, that you could be mezaka for a Talmud Chacham. So also the Kamid Rav Yosef, Amalei Dilma Mishum de Ovri Ashmaitza Demar, because I didn't follow the Rebbe's dictum, Akriyan Hachi, I had this dream of this pasuk. Amalei Ki Imrei Ana Ba'acher. When I said it, when I said it, I said where the kohen was mezakeh on his own for a Talmud Chacham by himself. Shama bal karchei mezakeh, but Rava imposed it on the kohen. I didn't say that. V'chi amri ana leman d'lo yefshalei, was somebody who was dechikalei milsa, somebody who was in hardship. Ha'efshalei, Rava is not dechikalei milsa. So he said, then if I was right for not eating, ve'lamai taima akriyan hachi, so why did they read it to me in my dream? So he says, klape Rava, they read it for you to tell Rava. So then v'lekrai and Rava, so then he said Rava should have had the dream. Says Gemara, Rava nazaf hama. Rava was rebuked by heaven. This is going back to a story with Ifra Hermes, where Ifra Hermes told Rava to prove that God listens to the sages to ask for rain at a time when it never rained. And Rava imposed on heaven, and he had to change his bed that night, and his bed was slashed with knives. So Rava was rebuked by heaven. When it says singing alev ra, what does that mean? Says the Gemara, that's teaching the song, teaching the learning of Torah to one that is not proper, to a disciple that's not proper. Whoever teaches a Talmud that's not worthy, Neifel begehenim, he'll fall into Gehenim. It's dangerous to teach a Talmud that's not worthy, because then other people will see him learning, and they'll think he's worthy, and they'll learn from his evil ways. Shenamar kol choshech tamen litzvunav. In darkness where it's hidden, the treasures. Pasuk says, Tochleu Eish will be consumed by a fire, loy nupach, that doesn't need to be fanned, that's the fire of Gehenna, which doesn't need to be fanned. Yera sarid ba'ahalai. If the sarid, the Talmid Chacham, has one bad in his tent. Ve'ein lashon sarid ela Talmid Chacham. Sarid is a Torah scholar. Shenem avasridim, the sridim asher Hashem korei. The Talmidei Chachamim, the remnants that Hashem calls. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Rav, Kol Hashoyna l'Talmud Sheina Hagen, whoever teaches a Talmud that's not worthy, Kizayrik Evan Lamerkulas. It's like throwing a stone to Mercury, in other words, worshipping the idolatry Mercury. Shedemar Kitzrar Evan B'Margema, like somebody shoots a rock with a slingshot. Kei Noisin L'Ksil Kovid. That's like one who gives to a full honor, teaching a Talmud that's not what Roy. What's covered? Ain't covered all the Torah. It's perfect for Lag Baimer. What's covered? Torah. Shenemer k'feida chachamim yinchalu. The wise inherit honor, which is Torah. That's the true honor. Usmimim yinchalu taiv. Those that are unblemished inherit good. And of course, ain't taiv ela Torah. Shenemer kilekach taiv nasati lachem Torasi al tazayvu. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina kol ha'isa taiva l'mi she'eino yoda. Whoever does good to someone who doesn't recognize goodness, that means he doesn't appreciate goodness. Ki'ilu zayrik evan lamerkulis. It's as if you're throwing stones at Mercury. Shenemar kitzrar evan uksiv lo'novel iksil tanug. It's not fitting for a fool pleasure. If a person is not makir taiva, it's not good to give him goodness because he doesn't appreciate it. And now we learn the Zayar. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai will forgive me on his yahrzeit for not knowing fully the esoteric understanding of the Zayar. Vitana, we were taught Yesoida, that's the Bechinas Yesoid, Visharsha, and the root which comes from Chochmas Habina, it's called Bina. Remember this, Chochma is the Abba and Bina is the Ima. B'malka mis'atrin kachada, comes out through the Midah of Malchus, they are crowned together. V'hayu Kisra, Malchus is the crown of Pischa and the gateway, L'chol Sha'ar Kisrin, for all the other Sfiros, right? All the other Sfiros, the Zer Anpin, which is Chesed, and Gevura, and Tiferes, and Netzach, and Hoid, and Yesoid. The Chsiv Pischu Li Sharei Tzedek, open me the gate of Tzedek. Tzedek is Malchus. Uksiv Ze Ashar La Hashem. This is the gate to Hashem. Va'aldo Ksiv, it says about the tzitzis. Remember we said tzitzis is Malchus. Or Isem Isai Uzachartim. You see it and you remember as Kol Mitzvahs Hashem. La'achlu Bahai, to include in the tzitzis, which is the Midah of Malchus, Kol Sha'ar Kisrin, all the other crowns. Valda, and for this, Inun Sadei Sadusa, the angels, which we said, come from the 7 rotations that we wrap the tchelis between the 2 knots, there spreads out 7 angels. They don't stay in one place. Begin the mitzvah, the mitzvah of tzitzis causes them to go out and around. The Tanina, now it's an interesting thing. we learned that Tashmishay Mitzvah Nizraken, that Tashmishay Mitzvah can be thrown away. You could take a tzitzis that's worn out, wrap it up in a bag separately, now with the chicken bones, and throw it away. Only Tashmishay Kedusha, a tefillin bag, a mantle of a Sefer Torah, that you have to be gunas, that you have to hide. So he asks an interesting question. V'itema ha-lulav arava, the arba minim, the lulav arava, hadas and esrin, which we say are four because they represent the Yud Kei Vav Kei. If they represent the Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's why you have to hold the esrig to the lulav, because it represents the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So then it should be Tashmishay Kedusha. Tashmishay Kedusha Einon. The din is, though, we know we take all the hadassim, the aravas, we put them in a garbage bag and we throw them away separately. So Amayin is rockin'. Why could they be thrown away? So Shimba Yochai explains, Ela Tashmisha Kedusha, it's only Tashmisha Kedusha, begin the Rishimim Baksiva. It's because it's marked with words, the Shema Kadisha, because the Shin of the Shakai is imprinted on the Tefillin. The Yud is made with the knot of the Tefillin. Amar of Yitzchak, Inon Chuten, these 8 threads, Lachzoah Heich Talion Mikana Mikan, they hang on all 4 sides, right? They hang on all 4 sides. La'arba Sitre Alma, in the 4 directions. Mehai Asar. These four threads that hang come from the Bechina of Malchus. V'i Shalta al Kula, and the Midah of Malchus has a control above and below, al elyonim v'tachtonim, and explains l'arba sitra, baraza delev, because it's the secret of the heart. Just like the heart controls the body, so the Bechina of Malchus impacts above and below, and that's why on the 4 sides you have 8 threads. 4 times 8 is 32. That's the gematria of Lev. Di liba the chalai alma. Bechina of Malchus is the heart of the world. V'liba the Eloi, the heart of above. V'talia belev Elah, and it depends on the chachma above. That means the spheres elyonas. It comes from the chachma above. The kulu belev, the nafak mechachma Elah, which the Bir HaZayir says means that it comes through 32 avenues of wisdom. Amr Yitzchak shiuri dahai v'urcha, the shear of the tzitzis and its length. Itmar is explained what everything corresponds to. Ba'asvin glipin de Rabbi Lazar, in the special sefer of the engraved oisios of Rabbi Lazar. He's not going into that now. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Kuchberichu, Man de boil mehach basar dechalti, one who has to follow in the ways of fear of heaven. Yahach basar libada, he should follow after this heart. In other words, after the Midah of Malchus, which is the Shechina, which is hinted to at the Tchelis, and we already said that the Tchelis is blue. It reminds us of the sky, which reminds us of the Kisei HaKavod. And also we should understand that the Zayar over here is emphasizing that Rachmana Liba Boy. Hashem wants from us our heart. He doesn't want us to do just the mitzvahs robotically, without feeling. He wants everything with heart. Kamada Atamar, Ubasar Einen the Kaiman Allah, and after the eyes of Hashem that follow it, that are mashkiach upon it. Man inun einen, what do we mean by the eyes? Kamadat Amar, Einei Hashem el tzadikim. The eyes of Hashem follow the righteous. Aval atem, the pasuk warns us, Lo yisasuru achrei levavchem, you shouldn't follow your heart. That means thoughts of heresy. V'achrei einechem, you shouldn't follow your eyes to look after that which is immodest. And this is something that's a tremendous challenge for us nowadays. There's so much immodesty all around us, whether we're in a train, whether we're looking at a phone. My timer. Now, why does he warn us about this? Because he tells us, recognize yourself. Begin the atem zoinim achareim. Because you have to know, as a flesh and blood, you will want to follow your eyes. You have to be very careful. Amar Reb Chia, so now Reb Chia asks a question. My time ahochi yitzias Mitzrayim, what's the reason why yitzias Mitzrayim, d'chsiv asher otzeisi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim? Why is it that the parsha of Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned in the parsha of Tzitzis? What does it have to do with Tzitzis? El begin the kad nafku b'Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt, b'hai chulka olu. Hashem took us out with the bechin of Malchus, with the bechin of Shechina. Remember, it says, El shmois b'nei Yisrael haba Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is b'gematria Shechina. And that's Malchus. The Kadnafku Mitzrayim, when we left Mitzrayim, B'hai Chulka Olu. We came up with the Bechin of Malchus, or B'hai, and with Malchus, Kotel Kuchberichu Ketula de Mitzrayim. He killed the Egyptians. Ba'aldoba Asrei Istaker, and therefore, in the place of mitzvahs, we remember Mitzrayim, or Ba'asrei Izdar Luhu B'da, and in its place, we remember Uzachartim is called mitzvahs Hashem. My ba'asrei, begin the high mitzvah yaseh delay. This mitzvah is the place of Malchus, and it's how we got out of Mitzrayim. Tani Rebbe Yesa, ksiv kimei tzeitzcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, like the days when you left Egypt are enul neflois. I'll show you wonders. So now the Zohar asks a simple question. It wasn't days. We went out one night, b'chatzos halayla, on the 15th of Nisan. It's not days. Kimei, like the days. Kayom b'oilei, like the day. Da'abachad zimna nafku. And one time we went out, v'lo isakavu, it wasn't delayed. We had to get out because we would have sank to the 50th degree of Tumah. It's referring to what transpired above. This Baruch Hu Knesset Yisrael, because the Midas HaMalchus was blessed with the different spheres from the Chachma and the Bina and the Chesed, the Gvura, the Tiferes, the Neitzach, the Hoy, the Yisoid. Kadzamen Kuchbrichu la'apakalu Yisrael min Galusa, when Hashem decided to take Klal Yisrael out of Galus. Ukedain, and therefore it's ksiv, it says in Yeshaya, V'amartem b'yom hahu, and you will say in that day, Hoidu la'Hashem, kiru v'shmo, Zamru Hashem, sing to Hashem, ki geyes asa, he did greatness, mudas zois, and he let it be known this, b'chol haaretz. My mudas zois, he let it known this. Begin the hashta ish demodah, now it became known, b'itufa de mitzvah, with the connected Mitzias Mitzrayim to the wrapping of the talis. So that was the zois at now. Ba'u zimna ish demodah zois. Now it became known through tzitzis. Bekama nimusin dila. However, excuse me, Ba'u Zimna, but in the future, by the Geula, Ishtamoda Zais, this will be known, B'kama Nimus Indila, in many ways, there'll be many signs and wonders. The Yavid Kuchberichu, Osin Venisim Ba'alma, will do signs and miracles in the world. Kedein Ksiv B'yoymahu, in that day, Hashem Echad, Hashem will be one, Ushmei Echad, His name will be one, everybody will realize it. Baruch Hashem La'olam, Hashem will be blessed forever, Amen v'Amen. Yimloich Hashem La'olam, Hashem should reign forever, Amen v'Amen. And now we learn the Musaf from Sefer Hasidim. We move from Rabbeinu Yaina to the Sefer Hasidim. Rabbeinu Yaina says, Al tadan es chavercha lekaf chayva. Don't judge people unfavorably. Ki adam yiralei nayim, because you only see what's before your eyes. You don't know what's going on. V'Hashem yiralei levav. Only Hashem sees the heart. And you don't know what's going on. You think you know what's going on. You don't know what's in the person's heart and what's in their mind. Judge people favorably, and guard your eyes from seeing evil. And don't look at people in a bad way. They say, how do you multiply by division? If you divide your money to others, you multiply your money. Give tzedakah according to your ability. Truth is, whether you give a lot, whether you give a little. If a person is poor, he could only give a little, as long as you direct your heart to heaven. Subjugate yourself to your Creator. Think in your heart. When a person had slaves, he watched his slaves because he wanted them to be taken care of. That if we behave, Hashem will take care of us. Be careful even with a small sin. Because remember, if you do small sins, that leads to big sins. Aveira gereres aveira. Kihi tevi achal lidei chamura. Overall, if somebody, for example, transgresses hating someone, overall, if somebody transgresses hating someone, soif balidei shvichas dam, you could end up killing him. Shenemar v'chi yi'ish soinei l'reyayu. If a person hates his friend, v'arv lo, he might ambush him, become a love, and stand up against him, v'ko, and smite him. Hishamalecha, be careful. Al teishav im adam, don't stay with a person that is not good. Don't hang around people that you can't learn good from. So you'll say, yeah, but they're fun. Yeah, but kikarav sheyilmad ra, because it's likely you'll learn something bad from it. If you learn something bad, woe to him, woe to his soul. Not only that, if you hang around the person, and that person does bad things, they'll connect it to you. It's a very important lesson, even if you don't learn something. But if you hang around with a person and it's known that that person does bad things, they're going to attach it to you too. People will suspect you of bad involvement. Why is he hanging around with him? And they will then connect you with all this guy's bad deeds. And now the Rambam continues with the davening. Misha Amar b'sachanunim, if somebody in supplication says the following thing, Misha richem al kan tzipor, the one who had mercy on the bird's nest, you can't take the mother with the child, you have to send away the mother before taking the child. Hashem is merciful that He doesn't allow you to shecht a mother and its child on the same day. Yerachim Aleinu should have mercy on us. The kiyotze binyan zeh, or anything like this, mishaskan I say, we tell them that's not a good prayer, because the dinim of Hashem we do because they're his command, not necessarily because it's merciful. They are divine decrees. They're not necessarily an example of compassion. Because if Hashem was compassionate, in your way of understanding, he wouldn't allow us to slaughter an animal and make us be a vegetarian. He wouldn't allow us to, but we're allowed to eat meat. So it's not because of compassion. It's din Torah that we don't necessarily understand. Don't make up your own praises for Hashem and get carried away. Hakel, the Almighty, Agadol, great, Agibur, powerful, Naira, awesome, Hechazak, strong, Hametz, courageous, Va'izuz, and towering might. Because Shein Koch Ba'adam Lagir B'sei Shvachav. Because you don't have the ability to say the full list, and people will say, and that's it, not more. We have only permission to say the praises of Moshe and not more. Now, what about Tfilas Mincha? We say Ashrei, Tila LeDavid Arimcha, Kairei Huva Am Yoshev. He and the people say it sitting. Then the Chazan gets up, Kaddish, and says Kaddish. And they answer the Amen Yesh Merabah, the Amen, etc. Then everybody says the silent Shemona Esrei. And then he says Shemona Esrei again in a loud voice, like they did in the morning, until he finishes Shemona Esrei again. Then he falls on his face. We all fall on our face with tachnun or mischanen, and we say supplication. Then umagbia roishai hu v'heim. Then he and the tzibur lift their heads umischanen ma'at miyoshev and say the tefillos of Shema Yisrael, Shema Sheres Yisrael, Mitzratza Beirachim Kedem Shasa B'Shachris, like it's done in the morning. V'aymed v'aymer Kaddish, and then he stands and says Kaddish b'kala Ein Kedarkan, everybody answers Amen Yesh Merabah and Amen, and then Meniftarin L'Masayim, and then they go back to take care of their needs. We thank you for joining us and wish you a wonderful evening.